My dad kept saying to my mum, like, when will Ella get a real job?
Stop taking photos of carrots.
Yes, exactly. Like, this isn't a career. Nobody makes a living from taking photos of carrots.
Hello and welcome to the Coutts Beyond Success Podcast. I'm your host, Laura Jackson, and joining me is Greg Kyle-Langley, our resident Coutts expert. And together we are lifting the veil on success in business and asking, what comes next? Speaking to us today is somebody that I am very excited about, not just because I know them outside of the show, I promise this isn't a setup, but because she's got an incredible story. At 21, struggling with a debilitating chronic illness, she decided to have a rehaul of her lifestyle, moving into a natural and plant-based diet. She decided to share her story and her recipes on a blog, which got her a global dedicated audience. 10 years and 4 million followers later, she's now running the multi-million-pound business Deliciously Ella with her husband, Matt. She's written 6 cookbooks, she's got an app, a restaurant, and a supermarket range under her belt. But what's next? Ella Mills, everyone. First of all, I have to apologise, guys. I've got a really croaky throat, so please bear with me. Ella, what a whirlwind. You have done so much. I think before we get started, it's a good time to reflect on what you've actually done, which is build one of the fastest growing plant-based companies in the UK. How does that make you feel?
Honestly, it's just really surreal. Like, it's really surreal. And I think, like so many founders, we were on such a great trajectory kind of pre-2020 and COVID and everything. And then the last few years have been really, 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 really difficult. And this year's been amazing again. And we're back in brilliant growth. And obviously that can bring its own challenges, but they're really good challenges again. And it feels, I felt very much out of love with the business. I think like a lot of people might have done in that period. And now, yeah, I just feel really, really proud of it this year. Actually, it feels really emotional.
Yeah, I think that's a really honest and vulnerable thing for you to share with us, that it has been hard, because I think outwardly when you are the face of a business and you've got a big following and you've got an Instagram, people look to you and think, oh, everything's so rosy and I have to tell everyone how great it is all the time. And to hear that you've been through hardship, I think is quite refreshing.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think whenever you speak to somebody else who owns a business, is running a business, you realise, which is obviously what you guys are uncovering here, these extraordinary parallels, that even if you do such different things at different stages, the challenges are often so similar. And I love these sorts of conversations because I think I'm so passionate about empowering people to start businesses. It is extraordinary. I think it's been the opportunity of a lifetime and I wouldn't change it for anything. I love my job, I really, really do. But I think there is such an over-glamorization of entrepreneurship, of owning your own business, of, hashtag girlboss, that is quite frustrating because it's not the reality in any shape or form. Like it's just an extraordinary slog that takes over your life.
I think it's so powerful for people to hear that from you, because something you see from lots of entrepreneurs, but also people who are aiming to succeed in lots of other industries, is they've got this target of, when I get to there, then it'll all be fine. And it sounds like it never is just all fine.
No, and I think that's exactly it. And I think, so I own the business with my husband, he's the CEO, I'm the brand director. And we talk about this a lot, which is that if we had, when we'd started working together in 2015, looked to where we are today, we would say, oh, we've done it. We've succeeded. We, set out to try and build a retail business. And we've done that. We're in all the kind of major supermarkets, fantastic. And, we went in, with some of our products, obviously in the bottom of the rankings. We own the business fully. So we've got what feels like a marketing budget of about £10, and we're competing against, brands owned by very large conglomerates. And we're now above them in the rankings. And that is really, if we had seen that when we sold our first product in 2016, we would have said, we've done it, we've won, we've succeeded. But it doesn't feel like that in any shape or form. It just feels like you're now at the bottom of the next mountain.
And how do you deal with those low moments when you have got problems within HR or cash flow, or something's happened with a recipe or packaging or logistics or like COVID? How do you deal with those lows within your business?
it's taken me a really, really, really long time to learn how to not solve them, but to kind of emotionally ride the roller coaster, because I do think it's a real lesson in adrenaline, owning a business, because you have the highest highs and the lowest lows. And sometimes those are literally 30 minutes apart from one another.
Yep.
And so you're kind of constantly in a washing machine, it feels like. And to begin with, I found that really, really challenging. And I would really jump to kind of worst case scenario. I've got a very overactive brain, and I feel its default is to catastrophize. And so I would find it really difficult to believe you could get through it. And I think the more experience you have, the more you believe, okay, like we can solve the problem. But I think the biggest thing is always finding enough energy to be able to do that, because it is always on. And there's never really ever stops. You know, it's 24/7. And so it's being able to refresh your mindset again. And when you're tired and when you're burnt out, to be able to say, nope, here we go again. And to be able to do that in a way that takes other people with you. I think that's the biggest challenge. And the thing that I've really tried to, I guess, reset for me is that when you have these periods, sometimes there's one problem and that feels a lot more manageable, even if it's a really big problem. But when you're kind of hit with a barrage of problems, and I think last year was definitely our lowest point in the business. It felt like everything was a problem, and really kind of reestablishing a culture within the team post-COVID, post-lockdown, post-working from home, getting momentum back in the business, getting the brand up and coming again. You know, I had 2 kids 14 months apart. And so kind of really feeling like yourself and feeling back at work, and the juggle of motherhood and work, it did. It felt, if it was any time where I felt most worried about the business, and I think Matthew and I slightly disagree on this one, but I would have looked at last year and said, if we didn't solve all those problems, I'm not sure we'd still be in business today. And those are the bits that I think are the hardest, when it feels like everything is a problem and there's almost not a huge number of silver linings. And I think every business has those moments. And ultimately, the best businesses aren't necessarily the ones with the best business ideas. They're the ones that solve the problems the best and are most willing to solve problems as quickly as possible and identify things as problems. And I think, again, it's a quite negative mindset in a way you almost need, I think, when you own a business, because you've always got to be looking at what's bad and what you can be doing so much better. But in terms of what's helped, I think I now really try and live with this idea of being 1% better. Like, you can't do all things in any given day. And again, my natural tendency is very much like now. I love immediacy, but you can't do that. And so it's really choosing to be like, right, but every day you can be 1% better.
I really love that, because that feels manageable for everybody. Just that 1%, just moving the needle a little bit.
Exactly.
Makes you feel like you're making progress.
If you keep being 1% better every single day, like, you will see really, really tangible results. Whereas if you try and solve everything in that given day, it's probably going to be more of a mess than when you started.
With that in mind, though, was it your vision to have a plant-based business of this size?
No. Oh my gosh, not at all. Like, I'm definitely a fully accidental entrepreneur. And I always think that's really important to say, because I think so often when you hear from entrepreneurs and people who started businesses, they are the kinds of people that are born that way. You know, that is their mindset. And my husband is very much of that approach. You know, they're the kinds of people that like sold sweets in the playground and, you know, had their first business idea at 7. And I think that people feel if that's not them, then they couldn't start a business and they're not an entrepreneur. And actually, I certainly fall into, I think, a different camp where I had a problem and I looked to solve the problem for myself. And in doing that, realized I could solve the problem for other people and set about doing that. And suddenly the business sort of started to unfold as it is today, and the opportunities came around the corner. You know, I wasn't ambitious at all. I'm one of 4 kids, and my mum always jokes that like she didn't really have any kind of career hopes for me. And it's true, and I don't mean that in a self-deprecating way. I think it's really good to be honest about that. Because again, I think a lot of people think, oh, I can't do it because I was never top of the class. I was never prefect. I was never head girl. Like I was never that person that was kind of leading the charge. I mean, I remember a teacher at my school telling me it wouldn't be a good use of my time to apply to be a prefect. And
the forms are too long, hun. Don't worry about it.
Exactly. And it's true. You know, I definitely was like a very average child. And again, I don't say this in like an overly self-deprecating way. I just think it's really important to see that there's so many different people who end up in so many different places. And just because you don't fit a certain mold, it doesn't mean you can't do it.
But then do you see that you have had a really big hand in how the UK, if not the world, sees a plant-based diet now?
Yeah, I think so. And I would say it's taken me until the last year really to be able to say that. I would always be very quick to say, oh no, I'm not an entrepreneur. No, you know, it's all an accident. Like I barely played a role in it. And I think it's because we have a really complicated relationship, I think, around the world, but I think especially in the UK with people with success. And I had a really interesting experience in 2017. So my first book came out in 2015. The first book kind of exploded. It became the fastest selling debut cookbook ever, spent 8 weeks at number 1 on Amazon. I had this just extraordinary experience. In the next 2 years, it was kind of only uphill. And then in 2017, I had this kind of complete, very personal, vicious, really kind of pretty awful in retrospect takedown by the media of how I was kind of absolutely the devil and I was just like Donald Trump and all these kind of bizarre things. Anyway, it made me so wary of owning any of my success and any achievements. And so I think I do remember really, really vividly one of my really best friends telling me like how her friends were quite thrilled at that the business seemed like it wasn't going well. And basically, such a long story, but we started off, the brand had kind of exploded shortly after the book came out. And I met my husband, who's now, as I said, the CEO of the company at this point. And it was really clear that there was this extraordinary opportunity. Plant-based was totally new. Plant-based itself wasn't a term anyone was using. There was nothing on supermarket shelves. It was just a full white space opportunity. And there were no other brands in the market that had credibility at this point or even really existed. There was lots of kind of old school vegan brands, but it was much more kind of an ethical perspective. It was still ultra processed food and it was like meat mimics, which isn't who we are. And so it was very clear, like if we acted right now, that we could have an extraordinary advantage, you know, real first movers. And so that's what we chose to do. And we decided there were 2 options. Either we would scale a hospitality business or we would scale a products business in supermarkets. And so we started with both. And what became really, really clear to us really quickly was that we didn't want to raise a lot of money. We wanted to own the business. And scaling hospitality is very, very expensive. You need a lot of money to open each site. And we thought to get to sort of 5 to 7 sites before it became very profitable, whereas the products business needed much less investment. We were using only organic marketing and the exposure that the brand already had. And so we could scale that a lot quicker. And that business started to scale very, very quickly in 2016. So we made the decision to close 2 of the 3 cafe sites that we had. And that was reported in the media as the business had failed, like, we told you so. Anyway. And so this government was very clear, like her friends were quite thrilled. They were quite pleased that the business hadn't worked out. And it had worked out. It was this extraordinary experience that we'd closed one because the other was doing so well. And that was a choice. And I very much believe in making choices in business, even when it's very difficult. And that was very difficult. We had to let a lot of people go. We made a lot of people redundant. It was certainly, I think, probably the most difficult decision we've ever made. But it just gave me this kind of sense really early on not to own any of your success, that people wouldn't like that. So it's an interesting relationship. And I don't know if women feel that more than men, but I have certainly felt really deep sense of imposter syndrome, of not wanting to own your success, of being kind of humble to the point that it's probably a bit weird.
Yeah. I mean, it's awful that we live in a world where, especially in the UK, as you said, that we don't celebrate other people's successes. I don't know if it mirrors something in oneself when they think about other people's successes, but it's a shame that we can't really lift people up and empower people. When did that change happen then, when you decided to own your success and be really confident and loud and proud about it?
I mean, it's still a work in progress, but I think a lot had to do with my daughters and wanting to be the best role model that I could be for them, and I guess have more confidence in myself. And I think also, I guess when the business got to a certain point where it's not like you've done it, it's a consistent work in progress. Like, we could be so much bigger, we could be so much more, of course. But I think it was getting to a point where it was like, no, okay, we're still here. You know, we've got to this point. And I think that gave it almost more validation and more kind of concrete evidence that it was hard to say that the business wasn't a success.
Yeah. Okay, Ella, we are at the point of the show where we ask our guests to open up their notes app because it reveals so much about our guests. So first of all, are you a note person?
Ish, I would say.
Really? I'm shocked at this.
I'm a running to-do list person.
Okay.
But I would say my notes are quite dull.
Okay, please read some out. I'm very interested to get into the brain of Ella Mills via the note app.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this sums me up perfectly. I think this sums up where my brain lives, which is like, this is my normal note, which is my to-do list. So the first thing on my notes is to buy a car seat for my daughter's doll.
Sorry, off topic. Where does the car seat go in the car?
Well, I think the thing is, I've got to now buy one for my other daughter as well, because they're a year apart and it's not worth it. No one wins by buying one daughter one present and not the other one. So I think they're going to have to share the middle seat between the two car seats. It's going to be cozy. It's probably not going to be my best buy.
But obviously the next step is just have to buy them a car.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean,
exactly. Write up all our Christmas recipes, which is terrifying because it's beginning of October. Something to do with the retailer we just launched in the US, and some notes on there. Notes on our new menu in the restaurant that we need to double the ice in the lemonade. Like, it's, so, I told you, it's really dull. Buy a light up mermaid for the bath for another third birthday present. All she wants is a unicorn teddy with a backpack. Find that. That's on my notes.
I love that they're all in the same notes. Buy ice for the restaurant, take over the US, get a $1 car seat.
Yeah. I'd say it's because in my brain they're of equal importance.
Oh, really? That's good to know. I hope, Matthew, are you listening?
Yeah, I hope no one is.
I know that you think that list is boring, but it does give Greg and I a real insight into the life of Ella Mills, not just business Ella, but also motherhood, friend, present buyer. I mean, this is a really big question for you, but what's next? What is on the horizon for you?
I guess in a way that note probably sums it up quite well in terms of placing equal importance on our US expansion and a light up mermaid, which is, and it is my daughter's third birthday this weekend, by the way, so I'm not just excessively buying them presents all day, every day. But it is trying to find more balance. And I'm kind of conscious of the word balance is sometimes quite frustrating, quite arbitrary and largely meaningless. Like what does it really mean? But I think the business has demanded so much for the last 10 years. Like, it has been our life. And again, I think it's so important to be honest about that. This idea, I really don't believe you can do it all. Like, I passionately think it's a really unhelpful way of looking at the world. And I know lots of people would disagree with that. And I know it could be seen as kind of not feminist of me and not supportive of me. You can do it all in a lifetime, but you can't do it all in one go. I think in any given chapter, the idea that you can do more than two things well is just really unattainable without completely burning yourself out in the meantime. And we, I say we as in my husband and I have made a really conscious decision. Like, we give everything to work and to our kids, and we don't really do anything outside of that. Like, we have the smallest social life you could ever imagine, like people in their 30s and 40s having. And some people might think that's really sad and that wouldn't be their life choice. But I just think the idea that you can be all things at all time and have it all work out is just placing really unrealistic expectations on yourself. And it's really difficult. I think it's a natural thing in a way for us now, but I think in the early days it was incredibly challenging. You just say no to almost everything, and you watch your social group get smaller and smaller and smaller. And again, I think it's just, I don't say that to sound like the least fun person on the planet, but because the idea that you can build a business and be present for everybody else in the meantime, again, I just don't think it's possible. Like, there are so many unexpected problems that arise that you just have to be there for, which means that having plans becomes quite unreasonable. And it's better now than it was, but those first kind of 5 to 7 years, like, that is all we did. And now trying to find the balance with children is, again, it's just an interesting juggling act. But it's really important to me as they get a little bit older to start to find more space for both work and kids. And that's probably like my number one goal at the moment, is trying to find a balance that works on a day-to-day basis where they do get real time with us and real focus and real attention, and we're really present and involved in their lives, but also keep growing the business.
As a catastrophizer, do you think you'll ever be able to walk back and let go a bit more, and is maybe only there on a few Sundays around the year?
I mean, I'm in the office every day, and so I still feel, it's ultimately like, we're still running the business. I think it's just realizing you don't have to be in every single meeting. You don't have to be making every single decision, and just slowly letting other people take on a little bit more of the doing. And you're always there watching is slightly more how I see it. But in
a much less creepy way than you're always there watching.
That sounds so creepy. And it's not in a critical way either, but I think it's always, there are always going to be inputs that are really interesting, and just making sure it stays on the right track. So still incredibly involved, but yes, I think it's realizing you don't have to write every single word. You don't have to do every single thing. There's bits you can pass on. And I think I have such a deep desire to be with my kids more that I'm more than happy to do it.
Does it ever get exhausting?
Oh my God, it's so knackering. It's like, I think that's the hardest part of having a business. I think actually, to be more specific, I think for me, and again, I think it depends what your business is, isn't it? But I think if you're a consumer-facing, product-led business, I think the biggest challenge is this idea: you have to evolve, you have to change, or you have to accept that you'll likely fail. And I think that is what creates the relentless pressure. Like, you cannot stay still. And every day, our office was in central London on Tottenham Court Road, and I walk past, the big shops on Oxford Circus that are closed, some of the biggest retail brands ever. And that shop is closed, and every day I walk past it, and it's this like haunting reminder. What was the kind of coolest, biggest clothing brand in the UK no longer exists. And it's, they didn't do a digital transformation. They didn't move forward when other brands did. And it's this reminder, like, you can't ever stand still. Like, if you're standing still for more than a week, you're going to go backwards. And you can't go backwards, because once you start going backwards, the energy required to start going forwards again is so extraordinary. Like, you can't do that too often.
And, you talked about trying to have balance between work and personal life at home. What do you see as a next step for the business? Where would you like it to kind of be moving forward in a business sense?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question, this. And I think it's got quite a layered answer to it. Like, we have a very, very clear business plan over the next 3 years of doubling our revenue, more than doubling our EBITDA. Profitability is really important to us. We've got clear levers that would help us unlock that. A lot of that's international expansion, for example, growing our D2C business, really investing in that. So there's like very clear kind of total business goals that, are formalized essentially within the team. But I don't really like having kind of very, very, very clear goals when you're looking at the business in a more macro sense, because you never ever know what's coming. Like, I think if I've learned one thing in the last 10 years, it's just that every year looks so different to how you think it's going to look. And that's the beauty of being, not an enormous business, is that you have the ability to pivot, to change. When opportunities come in, you can take them. And also when opportunities go, you can find other ones. And so I think, and also with the lessons that we've all learned over the last few years with inflation, with Brexit, with lockdowns, like planning in the team obviously do a lot of planning, a lot of forecasting, like there's no other way to run a business. But I think there is just this sense of this kind of really concrete planning of like, we will achieve it by doing exactly X, Y, and Z, and not feeling like you've got lots of flexibility within that. I'm not sold on anymore, because the idea that we know what the world's going to look like 12 months from now, I really struggle to hold on to that anymore.
I think people will look at you, Ella, and think, you're so successful. You've done it. You must be so happy with your success. Do you feel like that in any way, shape or form?
Oh my gosh, I don't think I've done it at all. And like, I sit here today and I think, of course you've got like still such imposter syndrome of thinking, well, we're only that big. We could have 300 people in our team. We're in, I think, 8 countries. We could be in 25. Like, who am I to give advice when I'm only 10% of the way in? Do you know what I mean? And so I think I still think that's probably just a very normal human way of looking at things, which is that it's, or I'm always kind of hesitant to say that. I think I am really trying to be more celebratory along the way though, and enjoy it more, because what on earth is the point of doing all of this if you don't enjoy it? And I've definitely had big chunks of the business that I'm not enjoying it in any shape or form. But I think we have now laid the right foundations, I believe, to get to the next stage. And it's going to take huge focus and huge dedication, and most importantly, the right team of people to get us there. But I do think that we have the right seeds, and it's taken us a decade to do that. But I think that we have done it now. And so I think if we get it right, we can grow a lot from here. And I've never felt that completely before. I've always felt there's parts of that foundation that are missing and that we need to improve.
But do you think you're successful? Because you talk a lot about we and the business, but how do you think that, not to be like, I don't want you to be, oh yeah, I feel I'm so successful. But, you must, like, you've done so much, Ella. I'm a huge fan, and what I think what you've done is amazing. But do you ever sit and think, gosh, I can't believe that I've done all of this?
Yeah, there's part of it. So we're filming and recording today near London Bridge, and I got out at London Bridge Station, and that's where I started this. It's where my dad lived at the time, and I was living with my dad. And I got out the tube, and I hadn't been to London Bridge in a little while, and I was just at the top of Borough Market. And I thought, oh my God, I used to come here and buy vegetables to learn to cook, to take photos of them for the 10 random people that read the blog at this point. And then I'm coming here today to talk to you guys about something that's so fundamentally different. It's an evolution that if you told me at that point, when my dad kept saying to my mum, when will Ella get a real job?
Stop taking photos of carrots.
Yes, exactly. This isn't a career. Nobody makes a living from taking photos of carrots and posting that on a blog site. So I do get these moments where there's a tangible mirror, I guess, to show, gosh, last time, I've been back to that area many times since, but it's almost like you used to stand here and you were at X point and now you're at Y. I definitely do have that, where I can't quite believe it. I was just in Switzerland with my colleague last week, and our cereal bars are literally in every supermarket in Switzerland. And those are the weird moments where you're in Zurich, you're in Geneva, you're in a shopping outlet on the outside of the city, and they're there. That's strange, and that feels surreal, and that feels pinch me. And I think that's when I think, oh my gosh, I can't believe I started with this tiny little thing and this is where it is. But I don't see it as individual in any shape or form. I really, really don't. Delicious Yella's success isn't because of me. It was started by me, and I created something that had a lot of legs to it from which we could build. But I really do mean we.
But does success look like security or having opportunities for your family?
Yeah, it does. It definitely does. And I think it increasingly will do now that the business feels at this kind of more stable point, which is amazing. Like, we did a really lovely holiday for a week to Spain this year, and we were like, we've done this, you know, we can stay here in this lovely hotel because of what we've done. And that is extraordinary. We're doing a 3-week trip to Asia over Christmas, my husband's 40th birthday, and we've planned this really amazing trip. That is the kind of moments that I think that we're starting to have now, where it's like all the work you've put in feels so worth it, all the sacrifices you've made, all the things you've missed, the friends you've missed out on, the life events you weren't there for, it feels so worth it because we're now able to start to create this extraordinary life. And I think, you know, I don't mean to sound like overly cliched. I feel I've spent a lot of time talking about how challenging owning a business is, and it is. And I go back to what I said at the start. I really disagree with the glamorization of entrepreneurship, but equally, like, it's amazing. It's so cool. Like, I love going to work. Like, I love it. I love it. I love it. And sometimes I'm exhausted and then I don't fancy going to the office that day. That's true. But otherwise, I love it. I work with the best people. We have this extraordinary mission of trying to change the way that people eat. And I feel really excited by it. Like, and I don't know how many people get to say they love what they do that much. And everything has downsides to it. And so I think for me, that's the luckiest part of all. And, you know, I own the business. And so I get to, at this point, having put in the time to build the team, I get to choose to leave a bit earlier to pick up my children from school, to then work in the evening. And again, like, that's not, I know how fortunate that is and how lucky I am to be able to even try and do both to such a degree. And so I think for me, that's the success, is that it's given our life as a family and as an individual this amazing sense of purpose and excitement and opportunity that I feel so lucky to get to do. And we've had like our lowest lows, but I think it all feels like it was worth it now. I mean, I remember there was this one week we had, which was, it was so bad. It was just extraordinary. It was the week my mother-in-law was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. My dad, as I was saying earlier, used to live in London Bridge, and it was the week of the terrorist attack in Borough Market, and they were there, like, that's where they lived. The police banged in their doors. My brother and his now wife and my dad living there, they couldn't go into their house, just like really frightening. That's where we'd lived for 18 years. We then got a colony of rats in our house that we just moved into, a whole colony, like the guy from Pest Control Games. Never seen anything like this. It's 25 rats in our house. He'd wake up. Gosh. We weren't sleeping because it was obviously such a traumatic week.
You just hear,
scratch. Oh God, it was just so awful. We had some huge problems in the business. It felt like, again, yeah, for sure, you could go bust. And it was all played out over about 7 to 10 days. And you just sort of thought, oh my God, like how are you meant to do this? You know, how on earth do you show up? Oh, and the same week there was an article in my least favorite newspaper about how I tried to kill everyone at my wedding by having poisonous flowers on my wedding cake. They weren't poisonous. I did not want to kill my wedding guests. But it was just, and then there was people writing underneath, she's an idiot. And anyway, it was just one of those, you've just had these times where they're like almost indescribable, but you have to go into the office and you have to show up and you have to say, come on guys, we can do this. Let's get the next listing. Because also if the business goes bust at that point, like everything else is much worse than it even could be. So I think it is like this realization, you don't get to the good parts without going through the really, 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 really bad parts.
So we're moving into the final part of the show, but I would love to know if you could give yourself some life advice to the Ella 10 years ago, what would you say?
I think it would have to relate to learning to ride the highs and lows and the roller coaster better. And I think it is this idea that nothing is ever as good or as bad as it originally seems, or almost nothing is. You know, you're always wanting that silver bullet, that magic answer. And it's likely that it won't be quite as good as you think it will be. And then equally, I think some problems come in and you're inclined to feel the worst. But actually, you look at it 3-6 months later and with a lot of resilience and digging deep, like you fixed it. And it didn't end up as bad as you think. And I think that would probably be my number one thing, like learning to ride and enjoy the experience a lot more gently, really, than feeling like everything is the best or the worst.
Mm-hmm. Stop catastrophizing.
Yeah, but also stop thinking that something is like an easy answer. Like there are no easy answers. Like there really is. Like if something is kind of too good to be true, it's not going to happen, basically.
Yeah.
And it's likely that there's something wrong with it.
Okay, we've talked a lot about things that could potentially be your goals, but I would love to know kind of in the near future or the not so near future, looking further ahead, what are your life goals? Maybe Greg can kind of help with a couple of them.
I will give it a go.
Yeah, are you writing checks, Greg?
Writing checks all day long.
I think my kind of key goal at the moment is finding, for want of a better expression, forever balance. A way of living, because I love my job, like I love my life. I'm really, really happy. But learning to do this for the long term feels very different than when you're living in a startup mode. And I think that startup period for us probably lasted longer than it would have done, because by early 2020, we felt like we were getting to our next stage. But then when COVID happened and everything kind of derailed for the next few years, it feels like we're sort of getting back on track again as of 2023. And so now I feel like I think it was correct to feel consistently stressed, essentially, up until about 3 to 6 months ago. Like, I don't think that approach was probably disproportionate or wrong. But at this point, I'm not sure the level of kind of immediacy and nervousness that everything's going to disappear and stress is necessarily proportionate to our reality. And so I think finding what feels, as I said, more like a forever balance, a way of working that feels achievable and can be consistent for decades to come, the right balance between work and home with my children, again, that feels something that I can do essentially day in, day out forever.
And I think that one of the things that I've seen from other people, not in this situation, but in aligned situations, is it's about finding the thing that's bigger, gaining some altitude on it. You know, this thing of understanding what's the business for in the world, but also to my family. What's the money from it all for? What does money mean? What's it for in our family? Because that starts connecting these things together differently. And once you can start thinking about the higher purpose of it all, that's the thing that suddenly becomes more important than the day-to-day. It's the same thing that we see with people that sell their businesses, that they think, I'm going to get across the finish line and then I'm done. And they realize, oh, life is the finishing line. I haven't ended that yet. And I've now got to find something new to do and some new purpose. And that finding the higher part of it seems to me the way to achieve it.
Yeah, and enjoying it.
Yeah.
Do you have a business goal? Is there a milestone that you want to get to within the business? Is it be in this many stores, this many countries, have this many products?
No, which I probably should. I probably should, don't get me wrong. But that's just not what motivates me. Like, we have a very clear business plan that we're working towards. And, you know, I know that that motivates Matthew, my husband, a lot more than it motivates me. For me, it is just like the whole experience that I enjoy. But as I think we were talking about earlier, like, I find it really challenging to set really tangible goals now, because the landscape just is shifting so fast. The world looks so different today than anyone thought it would, you know, a few years ago. And I think this idea that everything's going to look how you think it's going to look 12, 24, 36 months from now, I have a really hard time getting on board with. So of course you need a roadmap. Like, of course you need a trajectory that you're taking people on. Of course you need like clear financial goals, like absolutely. But I guess on the kind of more personal side of the professional, you know, I really want to expand the brand internationally. But again, like, we sat down a year ago and we had this like very clear list of countries that we wanted to do. And Germany, for example, was the very top of the list. Well, Germany's the country we're having the hardest time getting anything away in. Australia wasn't even on the list, but Australia now looks like it will be our biggest launch next year. And that's because an opportunity came in from Australia, whereas opportunities are really struggling to appear in Germany, even though we're putting our most time into it. And so again, it's like, I'm very conscious of being overly rigid in goals, because I think it's just in my experience, it's just not really how it works. And yes, obviously, like, we want to grow to be X size and there's going to be levers we need to pull to do that. But exactly what they look like, I think I remain trying to be very open-minded to.
I think there's something really powerful about the fact you've got a principle, 1% better every day. That is the answer to a lot of it. Obviously, you need, like you said, the roadmap that you can plug that into, but that's what you're doing, isn't it?
Exactly. And I think, that we've really, particularly this year, had this quite obsession with 1% better each day. And I think we'll exit the year being 365% better than we were when we went into the year. Like, I really, really do believe that. And it has been teeny, tiny incremental changes that we have made day in, day out, and really seeing the impact of that now.
Ella, thank you so much. I mean, I'm sure I'm speaking for Greg and myself when I say it's been so insightful.
Yeah.
Just that 1% kind of progress every day nugget, I'm sure our viewers will find really helpful. And the forever balance, because I think it's something that we are all looking to implement into our lives. So yeah, thank you so much.
I haven't nailed it yet though. So work in progress.
We're all a work in progress. 1% better every day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for watching and listening. Please don't forget to press follow and subscribe so you don't miss out on our next Coutts Beyond Success guest. Bye.